Welcome back. In this video we will analyze the moves bishop e7 and d6. So let's start with the move d6. Now white can play d4 as well as castle, but I think the more precise move order is c3. White wants to achieve a position with full center after d4, and still he's preventing black from developing his pieces, because in case of knight f6, knight g5, the pawn on f7 is hanging, and the only way to defend this pawn is by playing d5. It takes d5, knight d5, and d4. This is a very typical reaction, and it's the position is similar from the one from the knight g5 line, but here white has an extra tempo, and this is move c3. White ideas are connected with the move queen f3 as well as knight f7 and then queen f3, because knight on d5 is hanging and the pawn on f7 is weak. So on d4, if black takes, it takes d4, white castles, bishop e7, and now knight f7, king f7, queen f3. White will regain his piece, and he will have a huge advantage. This king on f7 is very bad. So we can see that move knight f6 is a mistake. Instead, black can play bishop e7, but here queen b3. White attacks pawn on f7. Black, of course, can defend it with knight h6, and he cannot play knight a5 because bishop f7, king f8, queen a4, king f7, queen a5, and he ends up with pawn up. Later he can castle and play d4, rook e1, and he's clear pawn up. So knight a5 is not a good move. The best is knight h6, d4. The most normal move in this position, white wants to take on h6 and take on f7, so black must react. In case of knight a5, queen a4 check, c6. Now white has a very strong move, and this is bishop e2, returning his bishop and threatening to take the knight on a5 with move b4. It's interesting to see how badly played are black knights, one on h6 and one on a5, and besides all this, the pawn on e5 is hanging. So again, knight a5 is a mistake, and black's only move is to castle. Now bishop h6. We are giving up bishop pair in order to obtain a better pawn structure. G takes h6 and castle. White plays very simple moves. Later he wants to play rook d1, or even to take on e5 and then rook d1. So here black can finally play knight a5, but after queen a4, knight c4, queen c4, white stands much better. White stands better, and this pawn is actually hanging, and black cannot develop the bishops the way he wants, because white pawns are controlling the center. For example, bishop e6, just queen e2, and now if e takes d4, c d4, and this knight will come to c3, rooks to c1, d1, or e1, it depends what black will play. Probably this rook will go to e1, and this rook can go to c1 to create some pressure on the c7 pawn, or even to d1 to control the center. So white here is better. And here the black has one more option, and this is move h6. Now he wants to play knight f7 and bishop e7, and okay, now queen b3 is not making any sense because of queen d7, and if white can here castle, or he can play d4. Castle, knight f6, d4, bishop e7, rook e1, castle, h3. And this is a typical reaction from white. He's playing move h3, rook e1, and later he wants to play knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, bishop e3. So here black cannot enter the typical position with isolated pawn, which may occur after e takes d4, c takes d4, d5. Because after e takes d5, knight d5, bishop takes d5. It's a very strong move. White is giving up his bishop, but now he will obtain very strong initiative. Queen takes d5, knight c3. When the queen leaves the d5 square, white will play d5 and attack the knight on c6. So black queen must defend this bishop on e7 in order not to lose this bishop. So queen d8, d5, knight b4, a3 again attacking the knight, knight a6, and bishop f4. Next move is rook c1 and probably queen d2. White here has a huge advantage. This pawn is weak and the pawn on d5 is very strong. His rooks are already on open files, and his all pieces are placed on their ideal squares. So we go back to bishop c4 and bishop e7. This is let's say the main line from all the sidelines. Again, white plays in the center, d4. This move is important. I would also like to mention that the idea of move bishop e7 is to prevent move knight g5 in case of knight f6. And black players usually play this hoping to get position after castle, knight f6, d3, which is the same like in knight f6 variation, but with one difference, and this is that white cannot play knight g5, which usually can happen after knight f6, knight g5, and leads to a very complicated game in which black needs to sacrifice a pawn. So bishop e7, but this move has his drawbacks, and this is the fact that white can play d4. Black hasn't attacked the pawn on e4, and white has enough time to play d4. So here black can react in two different ways. One is to play e takes d4, and another one is to play d6. Let's consider first e takes d4, knight takes d4, d6. Knight f6, knight c3 is not changing much. Usually it just transposes. So d6, castle, knight f6, knight c3, castle. And here it's important to play move h3. We will later see why is this move the strongest one. But first, instead of knight e5, which is the main move, let's check some other lines. In case of knight d4, queen takes d4, c6, black wants to play b5, a4, knight d7, bishop e3. This is a typical advantage for white. He will play rook d1, and later he can play f4, and his pieces are better developed than the black one. So after h3, black can also play knight e4, but after knight e4, d5, knight c6, base c6, bishop d3, d takes e4, bishop e4. This position is no fun for black because this pawn is very bad, and this endgame will be long suffering. So h3, black can also play bishop d7. Here normal would be to play f4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop e6, and bishop e3. Knight d7, knight d5, bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, and white has obtained the bishop pair, and his position is just better. So on h3, let's check knight e5. Black attacks white bishop. Bishop b3, c5. Now again black attacks white's knight, and later he wants to play c4. Knight f3. And now we can see idea of move h3. Black cannot play bishop g4 to pin this knight. Therefore he can play c4, but white takes knight e5, and if black takes d takes e5, then just bishop c4 is leaving the black with pawn down. So c takes b3, now knight f3. Now black can choose to take on a2 or queen c2, but in both cases white obtains a pressure. So bc2, queen takes c2, bishop e6, and now rook d1, and later bishop f4, rook c1. Black will have problems defending this pawn on d6. Also, white can later play knight d4 to attack this bishop, and he can jump with his knight on f5 or even b5 to create additional pressure on the d6 pawn. So on knight f3, black takes on a2, rook takes a2, bishop e6, and now rook a4. The rook here is very good place, because in case of d5, white will have later the resource of rook d5, and in case black plays something else, then white can slowly improve his position by playing knight d4, bishop e3, and again this pawn on d6 is weak, and white here is better. So let's go to the starting position after bishop c4, bishop e7, d4, and now d6. Here white has a pleasant choice between two good options. I think I will show you both options, and it is the matter of taste, so which one will you like more, because the main move is d takes e5, and this move simplifies position, and it leads to exchange of queens, but in which white obtains advantage. And the other move is move d5, after which usually occur positions which are similar to the King's Indian defense, but with much better version for white, because black bishop on e7 is badly placed. So first I will show you d5. This move is played much more rare than the main move. So knight b8, bishop d3. This is a very important move. White prevents f5, and later he wants to play c4 and put his knight on c3. Knight f6, c4, knight bd7, knight c3. a5, if knight c5, then just bishop c2, it's not making any difference. Bishop h3, it's possible to play bishop c2 also, it's not changing anything. So h3, knight c5, bishop c2. Castle and bishop e3. Actually, I wanted to play in move order like this to delay castle, because later white can even choose to castle long side. It's not necessary, but it's possible for the players who like to attack. The simplest decision is, and probably the best one, is to castle short and just play a3 and then b4. The bishop on c2 is very good placed, because usually in positions such this, white needs to play first b3 and then a3 and b4. But here white can play a3 because a4 is just losing a pawn after bishop c5 and bishop a4. Here actually black needs to play move b6, and now white can play a3. He can also play castle, and his position is much better. This bishop on e7 is very bad. So this is the d5, and personally I like this move more. But also we can check the main line. d6, d takes e5, and one of the reasons why this move is the main move is knight e5, because this move loses instantly. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d takes e5, and queen h5. Double attack, pawn on f7 is hanging, and the pawn on e5 is also hanging. And I think this move, I have won already more than 20 blitz games like this. So black's only move is g6 and queen e5, knight f6 and bishop h6, preventing black from castling. And next is knight c3, and the problem for black here is that the best thing for him is to enter the endgame, and with pawn down this usually leads to loss. So d takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d8, bishop d8, knight c3. White is developing, he wants to play bishop e3 and castle long. Knight f6. In case black wants to be smart and plays f6 with idea knight g7, he can easily end up in a much worse position, because the bishop on c4 now it's even stronger. a3. White wants to save this bishop in case of knight a5, so he can return on a2. Knight e7, bishop e3, bishop g4, castle, knight c8, rook d3, knight d6, bishop a2, bishop e7, knight d2, castle f3, bishop d7 and knight d5. We'll be following the game of Bronstein, and the white play is very simple, and he's already much better. His black pieces are in very badly placed. So f6 is not a good move. On knight c3, the best thing for black is to play knight f6, bishop e3. Now castling is not a good option, because after bishop c5, rook e8, otherwise black will lose his pawn on e5, because after bishop e7, white will just take on e7 and take on e5. Rook e8, and now knight g5, attacking pawn on f7. Again, only move is bishop e6, knight takes h6, pawn takes e6. And white has a bishop pair, and black's pawn structure is very bad, but actually white can improve this, even improve this position by playing bishop b5. Now black cannot prevent taking on c6, and after this I think just black is lost, because with pawn structure like this you cannot really hope for anything. So bishop e3, if knight g4, then just bishop c5, and this knight is not doing anything here. White will play h3. On the bishop e3, the main move is bishop e7. Long castle, a6. Now again, the short castle is not very good a move, because knight d5. White attacks c7 square and also attacks bishop on e7. Black can play bishop d6, but after knight takes f6, g takes f6, we will have the same position like in the main line, but with black king on g8, and I don't think this is a good thing for black. So on knight d5, black can takes, and now very strong move, e takes d5, white attacks knight on c6, and if this knight moves, then pawn on e5 is falling. So black must play e4, d takes c6, e takes f3, c takes b7, bishop b7, and now very strong move g3. Now white has a pawn majority on the queen side, and his position is much better. These pawns on c7 and a7 are very weak, and black cannot do anything to take advantage of this pawn on f3. White can just change his pieces, and his advantage is huge. So castle, the best move for black is a6 to prevent knight b5. It's a useful move, and later it can be connected with ideas of b5. a6, and now again white plays knight d5, attacks the pawn on c7. Taking on d5 is again weak because of the same reason, e takes d5, so bishop d6, knight takes f6, g takes f6. And white has weakened the black pawn structure, and he can hope for small advantage. Knight h4, rook g8, g3. White here has a small plus, but black's position is very solid, and well, it's certainly better to play this position with white than with black, but personally I would prefer the move d5 instead of d takes e5, because I like to play with queens on board.